Just as Layne Redmond's life would have been completely different if Glenn Velez hadn't dropped and broken his ceramic doumbek, our lives would have been completely different if we hadn't met Layne Redmond. She blessed us beyond measure. Hi, I'm Barbara Gail from the Rhythm Inlet, and I'm here to honor Layne on her birthday. I miss you. By telling our Layne, Barbara, and Jeff story. I first became aware of Layne when I saw this photo in an Omega Institute workshop catalog for her When the Drummers Were Women weekend. I was already into expressive and transformational arts. Whoops, the book is literally falling apart. It really is. I mean, look at this. Look at this. I was already into expressive and transformational arts and women's stuff, as we called it in the 90s. And I knew I had to go to this workshop. It was March 1993, and Layne and I always and forever talked about how we got snowed in by a nor'easter the very first morning. By the way, that photo, she gave me the jacket. In fact, I have two of them, and I wish I knew which one is in the photo. I know it's one of them. Well, that weekend blew me away. She played all her frame drums the first night, and my jaw was literally on the floor. I loved learning how to play the tambourine. I especially loved stepping and walking in time while playing it. And oh my God, the slides. The slides. I internalized those images right away and actually felt like I was one of those ancient ones picking up her drum. This photo was taken at that very first workshop that I took with Layne. That's Layne, and that's me right there over her shoulder, looking like a serious student. I returned home to Central Maine from that trip so inspired that the very next morning I played my tambourine that I bought from Layne. This is it, the Royce tambourine. That's what she was selling at the time, along with my new VHS video that I bought that weekend. And then I went up to our rotting old barn in the snow and in my pajamas, went inside the open space that had been the birthing room for animals many decades earlier, and the birthing room is significant. I'll talk about it in another video. And I processed around and around in rhythm with a pair of shakers, and I knew I needed to manifest something. That inspired Jeff to build a drum and dance workshop studio in that space, and 2 years later, September of '95, we opened the space at Silo, which launched my statewide, region-wide, and now ultimately national career, sharing the joys of rhythm and movement, hand drumming and dance to all people, abilities, and challenges, all ages. In every kind of setting imaginable, I went to over 350 venues, thousands of people, including trainings for classroom teachers. Several of my adult djembe, dance movement, and frame drum students, I honor you. You went on to become teachers yourselves. Meanwhile, a week after I returned home from that pivotal weekend, I received this postcard from Layne, where she wrote, "New York Goddess," encouraging me to continue drumming. I think she saw a little bit of herself in me, and I know I saw a lot of myself in her. We continued correspondences, and I just kept showing up at all her workshops. I was already a dancer and had learned djembe a little bit, so I started studying all kinds of world drums and percussion. And 1 year after I began teaching movement and world rhythms classes in my studio, I was invited by our local little public library to present a hands-on experience for children using all those percussion instruments which I'd been collecting for my classes. A photo was taken during that event, was published in the state capitol newspaper, and I sent Layne a clipping. She called me right away. Long story short, she put it in the book. Yep, that's me in the 90s. Brown hair and all. The following year, Jeff and I hosted Layne and Tommy in the space to teach, perform, and present Layne's slideshow. Layne's slideshow when the drummers were women. During that weekend, she announced she wanted to return and offer a weekend-long monthly training there, but there weren't any good accommodations locally. So following year, she instead offered it in Cairo, New York. Spelled Cairo, pronounced Cairo. It was the first GBTO training, giving birth to ourselves, not workshop, but training, for 6 monthly weekends. Her original plan was to hold the classes in her house and cook our food and have us all sleep over. Would have been fun. I signed up right away, but fortunately there were too many of us registering. And I say fortunately, I'm glad it didn't go that way because she had to move it to a hotel to accommodate so many of us. I'm afraid if it was at her house, she would have burnt out that very first summer. Anyway, I sometimes brought some drums and percussion to sell on those weekends, as Jeff and I had begun retailing those in our international fair trade craft store, Meridian Arts, which was also in our barn, and was gradually taken over by the folkloric percussion section and renamed the Rhythm Inlet. And the space became the space at the Rhythm Inlet. Inspired by Layne's Mob of Angels, she gave me this shirt too, and her ritual drumming video, I began teaching the tambourine to groups of women in sacred space right away during GBTO, which led to invitations for our processions and ritual drumming at special events statewide. Festivals. Look at these beautiful women. Summer solstice. Another festival. A wedding. We did a funeral too, which was very sad for one of our own. Concerts. And once we relocated to Florida, this was for the theatrical performance of the Vagina Monologues. So I very early on needed to name the group, had been grappling with it for weeks, all suggestions considered, but nothing felt right. Then one day I was on Layne's earlier website. Remember that one with the revolving moon? You show up on her website and the moon is going through all of its phases, revolving and revolving. The name came to me right away. Moonrise, Daughters of an Ancient Pulse. We performed all over, and we even had some of our own private retreats. For the next summer or two, there were monthly TransUnion and Tenfold weekends with Layne and Tommy. Jeff would come along sometimes. Say hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Bringing our old dog Hunter, and we'd set up a whole world drum and percussion store in the dining hall. Jeff and I were both among the wonderful group of drummers and friends on Layne and Tommy's epic trip to Egypt in 2001, and Layne's first group trip to Salvador da Bahia, Brazil in 2005, when we all delivered those huge boxes of Layne's Lotus tambourines to the girls of Cangial, who you see drumming and dancing in her videos. We also helped Layne move to Salvador in 2008 and stayed with her for 2 weeks while she had a small group of us. I was one of the first to purchase copies of her slides and notes when she originally made them available. That was a long time ago. For me, Layne's travels and documentation of those images are the cornerstone of this work. They alone tell the herstory of why women are returning to rhythm, and more specifically, the frame drum, which I believe is the face of the current rise of the divine feminine. And I've been told that by others who saw my students and I in performance. I've never seen a resurgence of women and frame drumming like this in all my years of being part of the women's frame drum world. And when I traveled to San Diego in January of 2019 to teach at a women's retreat, I discovered that on that very day, there were 4 or 5 of us teaching frame drumming all over the US and Europe. I'd like to think that on some level, Layne knew that. Layne's legacy truly lives on, and it must. Today's world is calling for it. Women are hungry for this, and that's why I continue. I'm inspired by this resurgence of women playing the frame drum around the world to be of service, to share my passion, my skill, and opportunities are coming to me that I just must say yes to. So thank you, Layne, and bless you forever and ever. I'm as fired up today as I was 27 years ago about this. And when a Vedic astrologer who has no idea who I am or what I do told me just 4 years ago that I was born under 2 stars, one of women's leadership and one of rhythm. And I said, do you know what I do? Have you heard of my teacher, Layne Redmond, and her book, When the Drummers Were Women? A Spiritual History of Rhythm? And she said, no, but do that. Keep doing that. Thanks to Layne, who continues to kick my butt, I'm starting to make instructional videos on YouTube as my offering. And may they serve all who hear that call. Thank you to any who are still watching. Thank you, Miranda, for asking me to create this video year after year after year, and now you know why I never did. Layne's been so interwoven into my entire life, and Jeff's as well, since I was 31 and Layne was 40. And I could make a video about every one of these chapters. I didn't even mention the inclusion of the Egyptian and Brazilian drumming that became part of the edutaining show Drums Heard Round the World that Jeff and I did for a long time, for first grade through university students and in libraries, and even on local cable TV back when that was a thing. Or how the Nubian drumming in Egypt and Layne and Tommy's Bumba Meu Boy from Brazil inspired Jeff to begin teaching whole hand frame drumming immediately after the trip to Egypt. So I'll end it here. In the same way, Layne often ended her emails and cards to me. I hope you're drumming. I hope you're drumming.